Welcome to video 2, Health Effects of EMFs. So here I'm going to go over a sort of broad view on what are some of the effects that EMFs have on our body, what are some things we can do about it, and what are some concerning trends for the future with EMFs and our body that we want to look out for. So starting off, I wanted to go over some current legal action that's just sort of come out over the past little bit that's really important. So the FCC is the Federal Communications Commission, and they are the regulatory body that is in charge of setting our wireless exposure radiation limits. So they dictate what type of exposure all of our technology puts out and what's a safe level. Now the problem is they haven't updated their safety standards since 1996. And in the last, 25, 26 years, there's been a bit of a change to our wireless infrastructure, a massive change, obviously. And also the amount of research that has come out in the last 26 years is huge. And so they were sued by the Children's Health Defense and also the Environmental Health Trust, among some others. Because they hadn't updated them since 96. And they're saying you've ignored a whole bunch of science since then. And there was 11,000 pages of scientific evidence of harm from EMFs that were submitted into this court case. And on August 13th of 2021, the verdict came down in this federal court in the US that, you've ignored FCC laws. They've ignored scientific evidence when setting their standards and when updating their standards. Because they didn't just set them in 96 and leave them, they've updated them since, the most recent time in the last couple of years. And so it was concluded that they had ignored a whole bunch of scientific evidence of harm, and we will see where this all translates, because the telecommunications industry is absolutely massive. It dwarfs big pharma. And so there's huge industry influence in setting these standards. So we'll see what this court case does for real world, changes to our technology and what our exposure limits are. But it should be a reason for people to take the matters into their own hands and realize, we should take some action on our EMF exposure. So before we get into what some of the effects are that came out in this court case and that have been published in research over the last number of decades, I wanted to go over how cell phones are tested for safety, because the way that cell phones are tested for safety rests on the assumption that you need to have heat to have health effects. Cell phone safety testing is only looking at the thermal effects, so how much something heats up. And how they do this is they take this mannequin named Sam, it stands for Specific Anthropomorphic Mannequin, and it's modeled after this 6'2", 200-pound military model with some saltwater solution inside this mannequin's head. And they hold a cell phone up to the mannequin's head with a space, 5 to 10 millimeters, because if you read in your fine print on your cell phone, it usually says that you shouldn't carry them against your body, or you shouldn't use them when talking right against your body. You should have a little bit of a space. So there's a little bit of space when they hold this cell phone up to the mannequin's head, and they test to see how much the liquid inside the head heats up when making a call. And from this, they generate something called the specific absorption rate, the SAR, and this is where they generate the sort of strength, what that cell phone's strength is, and if it's falling within the safety limits or not. But the problem is, twofold really. One, this mannequin's head isn't representative of the whole population, obviously. This big 6'2", 200-pound man's head is quite different than an 8-year-old child's head. And as I'll show you in a couple minutes, there's a big difference in how radiation is absorbed in the body from adults to children. So that's one issue. The other issue is it's resting on the fact that you need to have thermal effects to have health effects. Now, there was a really good study that was commissioned almost 20 years ago to help answer this question: is there non-thermal health effects from cell phones as well? And this was called the NTP study. So the National Toxicology Program was the one who sort of administered this study. It cost $30 million, it took 10 years, and the results came out in 2018. And what this study was looking at was cell phone radiation on mice and rats. And because the study was commissioned so long ago, they were actually using old cellular technology, so 2G and 3G technology on the cell phones. And so after the study, the results were they found clear evidence of heart tumors, brain tumors, adrenal gland tumors, and DNA damage, among some other things, in the mice and rats that were exposed to this cell phone radiation. Now, these results are made even more important because in the same year, there was the largest study ever done on cell tower radiation. So they changed how the animals were exposed to the radiation a little bit for this study. It was called the Ramazzini study. And in this study, they found the same rare heart and brain tumors as they did in the NTP study, which gives more statistical significance to both of those studies. So one of the health effects that came up as of a particular concern was the concerning effects towards children with EMF exposure. And this is due to the fact that children have thinner skulls, they have smaller heads, they have greater water content, and also their brains and bodies are going through a stage of development, and they're doing that quickly. So there's some concerning research around how much radiation is absorbed into children versus adults. And you can see in this video here, it's showing how radiation could be absorbed up to 10 times more in a child's head than an adult's head when holding a cell phone up for a call. So we really want to be careful of children and EMF exposure especially. Now, I'm going to go over some of the other published effects that came up in this court case and through other documentation on what are some of the other effects of EMFs. This isn't an exhaustive list. I've just picked some things to go over. And a lot of this research can be found on the Environmental Health Trust's website. It's an awesome place to go and search what are some of the effects on, like, their science section is really well done. So that's one area you can go and start. So some of the effects that have been documented as well are male reproduction issues. So EMFs and wireless have been linked to reduced sperm count and reduced sperm motility, so the ability for sperm to move well, damaged sperm DNA, and erectile dysfunction. So that's not great. Now there's also some female reproduction issues that have come up in the research as well. So prenatal exposure to EMFs has been linked to impaired communication skills, memory and learning deficits, congenital heart disease, increased risk of miscarriage, increased risks of ADHD for the children, obesity and asthma. All of these factors can be heightened for children when they are exposed to greater amounts of EMFs while in utero. So EMFs also impact our sleep. They open up the blood-brain barrier. So we've got a protective barrier around our brain that helps stop any sort of toxins from entering into our brain. EMF exposure allows that to open up and allows things to enter into our brain that should not be there. It disrupts the population of intestinal bacteria, which can compromise our immune system. And one of the ways that it can do this is through something called voltage-gated calcium channels. So low frequency to high frequency, all types of EMFs can trigger an increase of calcium into the cell. And this has a whole host of downstream effects, such as DNA damage, free radical production, tumor growth, neuropsychiatric effects, and it really impairs our ability to create melatonin, which is super important for sleep, but also a whole host of things in our body as well. So it's really a broad range toxicant in that it affects lots of different things and not in a good way. So one of the other effects that came up in the court case was something on environmental effects. And I was really glad that this came up because it's often something that does not get enough attention. So no safety limits have ever been established for plants or wildlife. And EMFs have been linked to a decrease in the insect population, negatively impacting bees and other pollinators. So this is a huge thing. Have a look at this video here. And this is a biologist talking about one of the factors of concern related to bees and EMF exposure.
New research from scientists at Punjab University in India claims microwave radiation from mobile phones could be part of the problem. Researchers fitted mobile phones to a hive and powered them up for 2 15-minute periods each day. After 3 months, they found the bees stopped producing honey, egg production by the queen bee halved, and the size of the hive dramatically reduced. I spoke to an independent scientist in the UK about how the bees might have been affected. He pointed out that bees have a pigment called cryptochrome.
Animals, including insects, use cryptochrome for navigation. They use it to sense the direction of the Earth's magnetic field. And its ability to do this is compromised by the radiation from mobile phones and their base stations.
And so EMFs can affect a whole range of animals and their magnetic sensing abilities. Also damaging trees and wildlife. So the environmental impact of EMFs is something that really needs some attention, because the EPA's, the Environmental Protection Agency's last review on environmental effects of EMFs was in 1984, and they haven't had any funding for it since 1996. So this is something that really needs some backing behind it. So EMFs interact with the heavy metals that are in our body, and not in a good way. Heavy metal accumulation in our body is a huge issue these days, because heavy metals, unfortunately, are raining down on us. They're in our water, they're in our soil, they're kind of everywhere. And so we all have some level of metal toxicity in our body. And if you think of EMFs, if you think of microwaves and aluminum foil, and that combination is not a pretty one. And that's what's happening in our body when we get exposed to these EMFs and they interact with the minute particles of metals within our body. It creates these little sparks, and this causes havoc within our systems. So that's concerning. What's also concerning is a new type of material that's getting quickly put into our world, especially since 2010, is graphene oxide. And graphene oxide has really exploded since 2010, and its applications are popping up all over the place, and no shortage of which in the biomedical field. It has a huge role to play in biotechnology, biomedical engineering, nanomedicine, tumor therapy, tissue engineering, drug release, bioimaging, biomolecular sensing. That's just to name a few. It's also being used in water filters. It's being used in a whole bunch of different things because it's the lightest, strongest, thinnest material ever created, and it's also the best heat and electricity conductor ever discovered. And so its implications are really quite massive. And there's some concerning sort of research on graphene's ability to assemble and then receive commands from electromagnetic radiation to do different tasks within the body. So that's a little bit of concerning trend, and it's not that far in the future. There's already a company by the name of InBrain, and InBrain Neuroelectronics secured the $17 million grant for a graphene-based brain circuit. And what this graphene-based brain circuit does, in their own words, is it has the capability of reading at a resolution never seen before, as well as detecting therapy-specific biomarkers and triggering highly focal adaptive neuromodulation for increased outcomes in personalized neurological therapies. So what that means is it can read your brain, detect specific brain patterns, and then alter your brain's functioning. So this is something that's being developed to help with Alzheimer's and things like that from this company, but the technology exists, and that means that technology can be used for either good or not so good purposes. And so this is something we want to be mindful of when we're considering how these EMFs are interacting with our body, because there's the potential that they could actually be interacting with our body and sending commands for different things to be done within our body. And so that's a concerning trend going forward, because this biodigital convergence of blending biology and machinery is really one of the biggest aspects of the next 10 years that we really have to be mindful of, because there's a lot of people working really hard to blend biology and technology together, and this has huge implications for manipulation. There's great benefits that can come from this too, and a whole lot of really terrible some really terrible things that could come from this as well. So something to be mindful of when we're talking about the health effects of EMFs is how this might work in the future. And this isn't really that new. For the last at least 10 years, DARPA, or the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is sort of the research and development arm of the Defense Department, they've been able to control moths with electromagnetic frequencies for at least the last 10 years. And how they do this is they implant a device early in the moth's development, and then this lets them later send commands to the moth through electromagnetic radiation, through EMFs, and they're able to control where that moth goes. So that's frightening, and they've been able to use this technology in beetles, dragonflies, and cockroaches as well. So this bio-digital convergence, this sort of blending of biology and technology, is a really worrisome trend that I think we would do well to be mindful of. Because as this graphene and all these heavy metals are in our bodies, they are being affected by these EMFs, and with the possible potential of actually altering your behavior as well. So frequency is life. And as we talk about raising our vibration and connecting to higher energies, we are quite literally talking about the electromagnetic pulses that we're putting out, because our bodies are putting out electromagnetic energy. When we have thoughts, those are electromagnetic energy. And there's you can see what the fields are of electromagnetic energy that are coming off of our body. And the strongest field doesn't come from our brain, it actually comes from our heart. And there's a beautiful organization called HeartMath that has been doing research on this for a very long time. And it's these sort of outputs that we want to be really careful of, and also the inputs that we want to be careful of. So we're always outputting electromagnetic energy, and we're also inputting electromagnetic energy by receiving it from our surroundings, and then we're putting it out as well. Different types, but still electromagnetic energy. And so when we're looking at cleaning up our area around us, this is cleaning up the inputs. We want to make sure we're in the healthiest space possible, a really quiet, natural level type of EMFs. This allows us to think clear, allows us to really be vibrant and thrive. If we are also looking at what sort of outputs we're putting out, this gets more into the thoughts we're thinking, the actions we're doing, and also the words that we're saying. And so this has a huge effect on our ability to thrive and be healthy as well. So it's sort of a two-way street. You really got to clean up what's coming in, and you got to be mindful of what's going out as well. And when we are existing in this beautiful natural space with low EMFs, and when we're outputting these beautiful, natural, loving, gratitude, joyful thoughts, well then, we're really shoring ourselves up and making sure that we're staying as protected as we can be. And one last way I want to talk about, because I always like to focus on solutions, is what can we do to help protect our biology as well. So we're just talking about our energy there, and now going deeper into our sort of dense being of our body. We really want to be mindful of what we're putting into our body. So controlling the acidity levels of our body is a huge thing that we can do to help make sure that we're not allowing any foreign substances to take hold within our body. So someone whose work I really like in this space is Dr. Robert Young, and his pH Miracle book and his whole protocol is really amazing at keeping our bodies as healthy as possible and allowing us to really be resilient and shore up our defenses against anything that might be trying to come in and take hold within us. And so his diet and protocol is essentially vegan, tons of water and healthy salts and healthy fats. A really good book if you haven't read it, really good book if you haven't read it, really awesome protocol, some great stuff there. So that's health effects of EMFs. There is a huge need to be aware of our space around us, and there's also so much that we can do that isn't that difficult to really protect ourselves from the outside, and then there's lots we can do to protect ourselves from the inside out as well. So in the next video, we're going to have a look at 5G, and I'll go over what that technology is, the implications of it, and what we can do to protect ourselves from the 5G rollout.